I'd say most people listening right now are trying to stay optimistic while the world feels like it's on fire. So, how the hell do you practice optimism when you have no control and no answers?
I mean, honestly, this is a question that I ask myself every day as well. I always like to preface these conversations with, yes, I am known as an expert in optimism and I'm known as the Optimism Doctor, but I am not the most naturally optimistic person.
You're listening to Mind Love with me, Melissa Monty.
I think the good news is that optimism is something I think it's been really sort of understood. Optimism is not a personality trait. It's actually a skill and something that we can build on, and it's a muscle that we can sort of learn to work out. And if there was ever a time to put, importance on working that muscle out, it is now. And I think another thing is a lot of people think that we gain optimism from when we are like experiencing bliss and joy, but actually we, cultivate optimism when we are going through struggle. And optimism is so much more intrinsically related to the ideas of like resiliency and curiosity than it is on just like blanket positivity. And so I think that right now it is just absolutely what we need. And I call it real optimism because the idea of this is really meeting people where they're at and really building upon the tools in the moment that they can use. And so I think a great place to start is, and something I've been like thinking a lot about, and it's something I talk about in the book. There's like so much in there, but one thing I've been thinking a lot about is don't forget to remind yourself that, you have been through your hardest and toughest days and struggles thus far, and you're here. So, like, don't forget to really sort of spotlight and highlight your own past historical resiliency. That is like where we draw upon the optimism to continue when things are really uncertain.
That's such a good point. It's like, what have I already overcome? What have I already proven to myself through my own life? Because you're right. Optimism's easy if your life is perfect. And what do we have to learn from those people? It's like if somebody's just like, oh, yeah, I'm always optimistic. I'm never down. I'm like, all right, well, then you're just not relatable. You're not going to be the person to teach me. But so often, the people that are most passionate doctors, for example, are the ones who specialize in something that already affected them. And so that cultivation is the part of growing into it rather than like, oh, I was just born with this. You can't just teach someone something that you were born with. And a lot of us, and I know you relate to this, relate to being deeply sensitive. And it's even more difficult for us because we feel everything going on. It's like I was optimistic until I walked into that coffee shop and there's somebody crying over there over climate change and now and now I'm like, whoa, what's happening right now? So how do you balance that deep sensitivity with the cultivating optimism?
I love this question because not only is this something that obviously I really like from a professional standpoint answering this, but like this really deeply hits me personally. If you read the book, you'll understand why. I was the kid that when the Titanic first came out, the movie, I watched it in the theater and I was so deeply impacted by it that I could not go to school for like 2 weeks. Like I just, which is so surprising. There's so many examples like that in my life that I chose a career in psychology, but actually, you'll see it does make sense. But that's the thing; it's learning the skills to navigate. I think it's amazing. I learn now. I'm in my early 40s, and I wouldn't trade being a sensitive person for anything in the world. But I will say that it's taken me many years to really hone in on and cultivate like a set of tools to navigate like the sensitivity. And something that kind of came up when you were talking about it is I think that we also have this natural sort of protection and especially as sensitive people. And I think that that also makes me think, I'm so tangential. That also makes me think, if you are a sensitive person, I have a question for you actually. When you listen to music, do you get goosebumps?
Oh, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much every time.
Yeah, me too. I'm like deeply moved by like if I look out my window right now and I see like the wind blows in a certain way, like I can be deeply moved, but I'm deeply moved by music. I always have been. And I think that it's interesting. There's been like studies on that too. And there are people that are just more deeply moved and we feel a lot more. But what I was going to say is when I was pregnant with my first child, and then, I had my first child, I remember in that like postpartum period and taking care of a newborn, something really interesting happened where I've always been someone that like watching, I never skip commercials. I love commercials. I would be the person that would like cry in commercials, cry at every wedding. Like I watched like every movie. It was just like an open sort of, everything was just open. And when I had my newborn, I started to realize that, like, not even intentionally, I was sort of blocking myself or limiting myself from like having really big feelings because I did not and could not handle having like an emotional hangover because I had to like take care of this child no matter what the next morning. And so I remember sitting with my husband and he's like, "You're forward winding through this, or like you don't want to watch this movie." And I'm like, "No, I literally cannot, like I can't go there right now." And so the reason I bring this up is, this is another example of, I think so much of what we go through is seasonal. And I don't mean seasonal with like, spring, winter. I mean our own seasons in life. And that like really goes back to something that optimism is about. And it's about understanding that like everything is temporary. And so during this one season of my life, I actually had to be someone that like was not able to open the floodgates of feeling, and I like blocked a lot. And then after a certain period of time, I welcomed it all right back in. And I think that, a lot is dependent upon what season you are in. And I talk a lot about that in the book in many different aspects. But once you kind of realize that, I think it makes navigating through certain circumstances and feelings, it doesn't change the circumstances, but it does help when we navigate through. We have an understanding that like this is just not the same season as the last one was, and it won't be the same season as the next one is.
Ooh, I resonate with that so much. Being 8 months pregnant right now, the amount of times I said, this is not the season for this.
Yeah.
Even just last month, I was like, this is not the season for me to be limiting my screen time. Like, I actually want to disconnect from my body right now. I'm so uncomfortable, which is the opposite of what I'm normally practicing, but giving myself grace for that. And I've already moved through it, and I'm still pregnant. And I'm just thinking, this also isn't making me feel good. So let's learn and pivot. But I resonate with well, for me, especially media, the things that we consume. Something clicked when I was pregnant with my first. I was watching a lot of movies and I was just feeling like shit. Also, that was when I know everyone's going through the Epstein files right now, but I went balls deep into the Hillary Clinton emails, which have all the same information, and nobody wanted to hear about it at that time. And I was just sifting through, and I'm like, I am traumatizing myself and probably my baby. What am I doing? And so something shifted then to where I am so cognizant of what I consume now, even now. And so I want to feel the whole spectrum of my life, but I don't need to feel the spectrum of this psychological thriller on Netflix just because it's number one in movies today. I really believe that the things that we come in contact with, we become a little bit because we're not separate. Everything's connected. And so it's moving through us and we're the vessel and it's changing us in little tiny ways, whether we realize it or not. And so I ask myself now, do I want to be changed by this? And I don't always have the choice, but there are periods or areas in life that I have more choice than I give myself credit for.
I think this is such an interesting point. And you're right. What we consume in all ways, whether it is through media, whether it is like who we get coffee with, whether it is, whatever it is that we're consuming, the food we eat, again, the people were around, the news we're reading, the magazines we're reading, whatever it is, the conversations we're having, all do impact us. Of course, we are, living, breathing, feeling human beings. I always like to say, I don't believe in ignorance is bliss personally, and professionally speaking. The reason so much of the tools exist in this book, The Power of Real Optimism, is because I think we just need tools in order to help us still stay engaged. Like my hope is that people can consume in a way that, you know, makes sense for them and that they feel empowered by. Oftentimes we can't control a lot of things, but some things we can control. And in this book, it talks about exercising where you can be in control. And for me personally, I believe that like just looking away or completely turning myself off from what's going on, even if it doesn't feel good, is not a healthy practice. I think as humans, we need to understand and not necessarily look away, but we do need to come up with we need to get to know ourselves and come up with real boundaries on like what our limits are. And I think limits are really important. My whole thing is I want to help people not like numb out. I don't want them to numb out, and I don't want them to completely be oversaturated and paralyzed by like everything, because our brains were not meant to consume this much stimulation and information all at once, all the time, from everywhere. And so for me, I've really like what's helped me is I sort of boundary where I get information from. And that's not always easy, because you just literally wake up and information is thrown at you no matter what you do. Even if you don't turn your phone on, although we do turn our phones on, like even just driving down the street, what you see, everything is meant to just bombard us and stimulate us. But I do feel like I have certain guardrails now. Like I know I can't consume right before I go to bed, like at all. And it's interesting. I want to do something that is taking my mind away from maybe my day, or just something that is not utilizing a lot of my brain. And this might sound really silly, but a little bit ago, just because when I turn on my phone, obviously I am met with, just like everyone else, just so much heaviness and uncertainty in all different directions. And it's very hard to stop that loop, even if you tell yourself not to. The way that the media is made and created right now, it's just to do these short clips, and another one comes and another one comes, and it's hitting on our dopamine cycle. And it's very difficult for us to actually, even if we have the skills. So what I've done is I'm a very nostalgic person, and I saw an ad during Christmas for like a revamped but like retro Game Boy. And I'm not saying like video games are the way, but this particular thing has been something, instead of scrolling my phone, in the end of the day, not like necessarily right when I go to bed, but I literally don't look at my phone now during that time, but I will play Super Mario Brothers on my little Game Boy. And it feeds me the same sort of like kind of mindless, but like a little bit challenging and like some sort of screen. But it has proven, at least for me, to be a little healthier. Obviously, doing things like taking a bath or, those things are still things I try to do. But that has become my new guilty pleasure. And honestly, it feels healthier to me than like scrolling on the phone.
No, there's actually science behind this. I read somewhere that there's a study that shows that playing Tetris after you're presented with traumatic information actually sort of detangles it from your brain. And so I feel like we're all so obsessed with productivity culture that anything that's off of that, we're like, oh no, but it's like, come on, this life is also meant to be pleasurable. We don't need to abstain from everything. But I love what you said, because I agree completely. I've gone down every rabbit hole deeper than anybody I know. So I fully believe in staying informed. And I'm very aware of how we are being manipulated. And even if it is from the truth, I just read this post from a lawyer who said, hey, we're being manipulated by the Epstein files right now. The way that they're dumping information one by one, leaving the reader and the viewer to sift through it and make sense of it all. She said, apparently in court, there's a very particular process of how they release information when it involves heinous crimes. Because, as you mentioned, when we are overloaded with that dopamine or those emotional feelings, it actually hijacks our brain and we have no more ability to think logically. And so that's not staying informed. You're allowing yourself to be hijacked. And then even if you go to take action, it's not going to be logical. You're just going to be spiraling and kind of destroying yourself from the inside out. So I love that practice. For me, what I've been really playing with this last 6 months is figuring out that I read that chaos is just unharnessed energy. And so when I'm feeling that inner chaos, what I've been trying to do, I've also been trying to reduce my screen time, despite what I said before. I had enough of it. I'm like, I'm not feeling good. So what else can I do? And so now I'm limiting my screen time quite a bit. And so when I consume new information, which I still do, I still want to know what's going on. I might not click the graphic file with the photo or the video, but I want to sit in stillness and make sense of what I've just found. What does this mean to me? Where is this hitting me? What part of myself is this activating? What does she need right now to feel safe? And I feel like when we can do that internally, we have more tools to give to other people because we're extracting our own wisdom. We're allowing our own wisdom to come through.
That is so important. Another thing I talk a lot about in the book is the idea of intuition and just the way in which our society and the way technology has increased so much. And, you know, in our lives and definitely in our kids' lives, we are like so far from our intuition. But I want to say, like, the good news is, like, it's still there. It's always been there. It's just that the way in which the world is right now, there's so much noise that we're not really giving ourselves. I was going to say we're not given, but honestly, we're not giving ourselves, because I want to take the control back there a little bit. The opportunity or the space or the chance to really get to know and build that relationship and that foundation with our intuition. And we are intuitive beings as humans. There is like a large part of our brain that is made up for intuitive learning. And so it's all there. It's just that we need to give ourselves the space for it. And then I was going to say also that I liked what you said about, you know, the chaos and the sort of unharnessed energy. For me, a lot of times that means like shaking it out, like fully, like literally putting on music and just dancing or moving or just shaking things out, which is like a very simple, easy way to also just change up what is going on in your brain and to focus on something else and to move your body. And I literally recommend just like every 90 minutes, because we are on cycles, getting up and just like shaking out, turning on some music, even if it's for like 20 seconds, and just moving your body or doing something entirely different, and then coming right back to whatever it is that you were doing. And again, I just really feel that we need tools, and I like that you use the word safety, because what a lot of people don't understand neurologically is that we could have all the tools in the world for self-growth and understand them and know about them or want to know about them, but we will not grow unless we feel safe, because our brain prioritizes safety and capacity over growth. So the better thing to do would be to develop practices in which you feel safe and in which you feel regulated and in which you feel like you are gaining more or adding more capacity. And only when you have those things can you actually make real change.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, so there's a lot of things in the self-development world, spirituality world. It's almost like sometimes a label or a name for something feels really revolutionary at first. It feels good at first, and then it just becomes so played out that I just get the ick for it. Mm-hmm. And there's so many tools, I'm using air quotes, in the spirituality world. Like, I get so many pitches every day, and it's like, the new manifestation expert. And I should not be allowed to email back when I'm pregnant. I'm like, dude, this is so played out. Like, absolutely
Yeah.
not. Get a better pitch.
Right.
Like, I hope no one's gonna like compile all my email responses one day. But like even affirmations, vision boards,
Mhm.
there is a place for all those, and I love them. But I get the ick by the name, and so same thing with the word safe space.
Mhm.
There are no safe spaces in this world, and to expect them and to claim them, I just immediately am like, I don't even want to go into your safe space. Like, what's in there? But I loved how you framed that as like developing your own tools to bring yourself to safety. That is the only way you're going to be empowered. You can't be walking around being like, this isn't safe. That guy in the corner said this, kick him out. It's like, what world are you living in? And who taught you this is how the world works? And so, what are some of those tools for you when you're feeling hijacked that bring you back to safety besides retro video games?
Well, for me, like music is my number one. It always has been my surefire sort of proactive mental health tool. And I've always been someone that is like very moved, drawn, just like really lit up by music. And what I love about it, and I was talking about this with someone the other day, is it's not just that I use music as a way to change my feeling or boost my mood. I oftentimes use music to like actually allow myself to sit in whatever I'm actually feeling to understand it better. So like I know it sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes the only way for me personally, and I this is something I bring to my clients too, for me to like really navigate through a tough emotion is not to just do something that flips it around and makes me feel better. It's to sit in it and understand it. And sometimes the only way for me to do that is like if I'm feeling sad about something, I will find myself naturally gravitate to putting on a piece of music that actually keeps me in that emotion. So like it is something that's making me feel more maybe melancholy or sad or bringing me back to something kind of nostalgic. Again, that like melancholy feeling. And from there, I feel like I can actually like sit in it and understand it and not push it under the rug, but like navigate through it instead of like, oh, do you use music just to like, you're feeling this certain way and you're down and you just need music to pump you up. And sometimes it's that, but that's more for me. I think music for me is more about matching my current emotion and it helps me navigate through so I can then find my way in a different one.
This is so similar to what I've been exploring, just coming in from a different entry point. Well, I think I've come into the same thing through multiple entry points because that's what truth is, you know? But I love exploring the Gnostic texts, like the biblical texts that were hidden from us. And right now, my deep dive is going back to Mary Magdalene. And
Mm.
she talks about Mary Magdalene was really the counterpart of Jesus, if you believe that he existed, since nobody ever wrote about him during the time he was alive. But she was the female counterpart, the divine feminine of it. And she talks about the seven deadly sins, as religious people call them, but she actually calls them the seven powers. And it's because each one of those things is something that compounds on the other to master. And when you master, it becomes a power. And so you have to sit in gluttony. You have to sit in envy. You have to sit in these really uncomfortable feelings in order to bring them into balance. But what she talks about is holding them in a space of love, which has changed another word that started to give me the ick, holding space for. And
Mhm.
now I'm like, oh, I understand what this means. Like it's not just saying the words and sounding like somebody who lives in downtown Santa Monica. It's actually creating that container, putting on the music to keep you there so that you don't run like we're used to, like our instincts want us to keep us safe. But we're holding that and we're saying, like, it's okay. Give this a voice. This is normal. This is human. We don't need to push it away or exile it. The only
Mhm.
way to integrate it is to actually feel it. And like you said, even moving that through with dancing,
Mhm.
like animals shake after they've
Yeah.
been chased, like getting that through our bodies so that it doesn't stay stuck there.
This is so interesting. I don't have very much experience in sort of the religious aspects, and I can't speak too much of it, but I think it's so interesting when you were speaking about, I love learning about other people's processes and their curiosities and sort of the paths that they go down and finding common ground and similarities. And from a science-based perspective, because that's where I come from, I like kept thinking when you said, she's, talking about these as powers rather than the sins, that is perspective shifting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's taking something and sort of holding a different perspective. And that's such a great illustration. Like there's so many that like one thing can have so many different ways of being viewed, about, understood, taken in. And that is honestly one of the tools in real optimism, is the ability to perspective shift and to be, in the end of it, like what I'm teaching is to be cognitively flexible. And that is something that I don't feel like we talk enough about. We talk about these like sort of safe spaces, or we're talking a lot right now about nervous system regulation, and that is important too. But what we really ought to be talking about right now is the idea of, I always feel like when people ask, like, when do you feel, mentally healthy or stable or happy or whatever that is. And I think it's when I feel like I'm at a time when I'm able to be like mentally flexible, because there will always be uncertainty. And that's the thing. Like I talk about optimism, but my optimism that I talk about, and real optimism, is that none of us are immune to struggle. So this is not about imagining or manifesting a life that is full of bliss and with no roadblock or setback, and being, without worry. In fact, there's a tool in a chapter in the book where I talk about, actually, instead of trying to come up with a world or life where you have no worries and that's your goal, there's going to be worry. And not only is there going to be worry, what I think you should be doing is scheduling worry time into your actual calendar. So it's meeting, real life and reality where it actually is, instead of, and it brings me back to sort of some of the things that bring you ick, which I can completely relate to. This book and the practice of real optimism, I think it's interesting because I think most people, when they hear the title or see it, they may think they know what we are talking about, but they might be pleasantly surprised that, real optimism doesn't deny the dark. It actually just gives us a way to see within it.
Right. It reminds me of something you talk about in your book, like the difference between actually being optimistic, knowing what that is, versus performing positivity, which I think is the big misconception that most people come by. And don't get me wrong, I still use every single one of those tools that give me the ick. I've just also had to reframe those because I'm like, all right, I've gotten too many people pushing it on me in this surface level way. And I think that's the path too of spirituality, of self-development, is a lot of these things do pull people in with the surface level version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through the work and through the journey that you realize, oh, it's not quite this simple. Oh, it's not just about this. Oh, I'm not just sitting here doing 20-minute meditation every day to manifest my abundant life. Like, I got to go meet it with action. I've got to go like allow that space to actually receive wisdom, get downloads. That's another thing that I get the ick about. Like, I'm getting a download. I'm like, I know what that feels like, and I get them too. And I can't stand hearing you say it.
How do you feel about the word intuition?
I still love intuition. I think that goes back so far though. And I think a lot of people use it wrong. I think people really confuse their programming with their intuition. And so it's more difficult, or it's a little more complex, I'd say, than it's like, well, your intuition is the first thought that comes to your head. Actually, quite often the first thought that comes to your head is your programming. Mm-hmm. And what wisdom actually is not acting on that first thing to tell off your friend who just said something triggering to you. And it's to sit in it and find your higher truth. So yeah, I no problem with that word.
confused about intuition, and myself included, and I work on all the time, is because literally we are living in the type of world, and have been for quite some time, where naturally there are not organic ways to tap in and have space for intuition. And so it is up to us to create that. And the only way to do that is to spend time like getting to know yourself. And that's all it is. And that is hard for people because, and I get it, like I find myself, the thing that I'm working on is these moments that are in between the actual moments of when we're doing things. For example, driving in a car. I live in LA, so lots of driving. And whenever there's a red light, like I have the urge, which is completely automatic now. And I literally have my 8-year-old in the back, like calling me out on it because I've asked him to. Right when I hit the red light, I have an urge to like pick something up, whether it's my phone, which is not great. And now I'm starting to put I tried to use self-control and like have my 8-year-old tell me, or just like, oh, I'm doing it. And it is so automatic and programmed. And I'm not afraid to admit it, that like I actually need the practice of keeping my phone not in hands distance, because before, like, used to just be at a red light and maybe like look around, or have some thoughts or whatever it is. And then I find myself like any moments where there's just, it's the same thing. Like, this is kind of gross, but it's the reality. Like when you need to just go to the bathroom, how many of us take our phones with us? Like any time we have these like middle moments between doing things, we are constantly filling it up with something that is like, either because we want to be productive and like we don't know what it's like to just sit with nothing, even for a minute or a moment, because we feel either lazy, or it's become so automatic that it's just like, it's Pavlovian, and it's something that we're just like automatically doing. And so breaking some of those, which is hard work, it's not something that you just ask the universe for. Like, believe me, this takes work, but it's not impossible. And the only way to sort of get back in touch with your intuition, which we all have, and it is there, and you're right, it's very different than the first, thought, or being reactive, or being triggered, or even wisdom. Like it's all, and that's something I talk about in the book, how to actually get back in touch with it. But all of it sort of just drives back to, there is no time wasted in time sort of being with yourself. And that takes working through discomfort, because most people are not okay just sitting with themselves. Like, that's scary. That's when worry comes in. That's when anxiety comes in. That's when, pressure comes in, like your voice. But that is the only way to sort of increase the intuition, which is a powerful tool that we do all possess, and really is something I'm working on and helping people understand, like working on to get that relationship to be so much more in the forefront of the decisions they're making. Because in the world we live in today, decision making is tough. There's so many choices. There's so much noise. I think I read this study a few years back that was like, the best way to make decisions is when you have like 3 choices. Like, what part of our world do we just have 3 choices anymore? Like, you go down the cereal aisle and there's like 100 different cereals, and let alone like, dating. I was talking to someone about that, and like the swipe culture, and just how much more choice we have now. And in some regard, of course, it's amazing to have choice, but at what point does having too many options make us paralyzed for making a decision and really trusting what we really think, and how much are we assigning that out? I see it all the time, even in really little decisions. It's that idea of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, I relate so much. That was actually the best part of being vegan for 5 years, which I no longer am, but was something that a lot of people find really frustrating. I found really freeing. You go
Like
to a
having less
restaurant,
choice to
there's
eat.
one vegan thing on the menu. I know what I'm going to order. I'm not indecisive. I'm not sitting there. And so I found that creating that structure, like what are the rules that I live by? What are the values that I come back to, makes it a lot easier, because then it takes away options for me while
Yes.
still being value driven. But it reminds me of something you said earlier talking about being mentally flexible.
Mhm.
And this is something that I find to be a struggle sometimes. I mean, in many areas, I'm as mentally flexible as I feel like I can be. Like, I will change my mind if I'm presented with new evidence. I'm not going to sit there. I think, at least this is how I view myself. I'm pretty proud of it. Constantly changing. It confuses people. But I also do a lot of research
Mhm.
on the things that matter to me. And so that's where this sort of paradox comes in of, all right, yeah, I'm really mentally flexible. Give me information that'll change my mind. But just know I have done so much research on this that the chances of you giving me information to change my mind are very slim. And so I find myself having like a shorter attention span for the
Mhm.
conversation. When I'm 25 seconds in, I'm like, I can already tell that you have not gone as deep as I am. How do you balance that as somebody who educates herself, who
Mhm.
likes to be informed and learn about stuff with that mental flexibility?
So really two things. Like first, the thing that like keeps coming up for me when I'm hearing you say that is I try and I think I always try to help people understand how undervalued the idea of being curious is. I try to stay in curiosity. Like, even if I might have my mind made up on something and I've done a lot of the research, I feel like I'm really pretty much always rooted in curiosity. Like, even if I walk away from something and I'm like, that's not gonna, I don't know if that's going to really like weigh in on changing how I feel about something, but I'm like still very curious as to why you think this or as to where you got this from. And it just is like really driven by curiosity rather than like coming in with the idea that like something you say, the only way I'm going to think it's important is if it has the possibility of changing my mind. It's more just like curiosity. But then what I will say about mental flexibility and what I mean by that is more along the lines of being able to deal with uncertainty. So being able to be flexible, when an outcome that you so strongly prepared for or wanted, or even thought might be what is to happen, doesn't turn out the way that you planned for. So that to me, if you can be mentally flexible, um, in situations that are uncertain, and that's what I strive for to be, and I'm not always at all, and that's I don't think any of us are always, and I would happen to say that more so than not, I'm not, and it's like definitely work for me. Um, but those are examples of like even the way in which you might think humanity is. And then all of a sudden you are exposed to what's happening, like even now in some regards, and you're deeply disturbed by it. And you're like, this is not like, this is what I thought. This is what I expected from people. This is what I expect from humans. And you're disappointed. It's okay to be disappointed. But, or even an example like, Lindsey Vonn at the Olympics right
Oh,
now.
that was so sad.
Yeah, and amazing that she went out and did. I know she's getting a lot of like, oh, that is just crazy that she's even getting any sort of like plaque for doing it. I mean, amazing. That's not the outcome that she hoped for. And happens a lot with elite athletes. But like how, like being afraid of what an outcome might be, there is sometimes it can send you in a direction where you don't even try. And that is not where we hopefully want to be. But also like being able to, and I talk about this a lot, I don't know, it just comes to me because one of the podcast episodes when I had my podcast and I had this man on the podcast who used to work with Olympic athletes and sort of highly gifted musicians. And I thought it was so interesting because I study visual imagery a lot and visualization and sensory based visualization. And I loved what he shared because it was so in line with the stuff that I've studied. So people think that when you visualize something, you are to just visualize like the outcome that you want, and you sort of stop there. I talk a lot about this as a chapter in the book on how you should be using science-based visualization to help with optimism and real optimism and actually challenging self-limiting beliefs and etc. But something I think people miss is you also need to visualize alternative outcomes. And that is how we prepare for them. So a lot of times these elite athletes, they may be obviously mental rehearsing and obviously visualizing, like doing really well at something. And, we can't always physically practice. Our bodies can't take as much physical practice. So a lot of this comes from sports psychology, and they've been using visualization for super long time. But something that I think people overlook is they also visualize when things are not going perfectly. So, if, there is, I think it was it was Michael Phelps, and this man was talking about it as well. And he visualized like what it would be like to be, if his goggles were like not visible, fully visible when he was diving or whatever that was. And he prepared for it. And when it happened, he had the ability to act and to be flexible because he also prepared for that, not just a person that is like, this is what I want, and this is what I visualize, and this is what's on my vision board, and this is the outcome, and that's all there is to it. And now I'm just waiting for it to fall into my lap. Like, of course, there is a lot more work from A to B to get there, A to Z, but also like there is time and place to visualize when things don't go ideally exactly the way, and you still can shift and pivot and visualize how you may react or act in those scenarios too, to help prepare you for the best outcome.
I'm so glad you're saying this because it's something that's popped up for me in the last few months. This has been a very difficult pregnancy. So, by the way, I loved the section in your book where you shared your sickness during pregnancy and how hard it was to show up with your tools and how you felt like a fraud. I felt like I wrote it. I've had those same conversations.
I'm
I
so
was
sorry
like, I need
that you
to.
feel this way, but I'm glad to know that you hopefully feel like you're not alone.
Yeah, yes. And I stewed in it for a little bit.
Mhm.
Then I got a therapist, and I was just like, I just need to like get this stuff off my chest that I don't want to say out loud to other people. And then a bunch of stuff happened. And of course, I'm asking for the transformation, and I'm getting a whole lot of hardships that are creating the transformation in ways that I definitely would not have chosen. I'm like, can I just go back to being sick? But it was what resonated with what you just said right now and kind of connected these two ideas is something shifted for me last month. I was in this really deep visualization. It almost felt like a spontaneous DMT experience. I was completely transported, and I was visualizing myself sort of ushering my family into a new world, a new energy. And there's a lot that went with it. With a mother wound I've also been dealing with on the other side of my lineage and all, but it converged, and I started to realize how often our visualizations are outcome based and not, I don't know if identity based is the right word, but who do you want to be in the
Mhm.
situation no matter what
Yeah.
the environment looks like?
Yes.
And that really shifted how I was able to show up because it wasn't just about me like, okay, yeah, but this and this is happening and this just hurts so much and I'm miserable. It's like, okay, well, now you're the matriarch of the family. You are the one setting the example for how your kids deal with hardship. How does this shift? And it's not just about them, that identity shift of like, okay, well, yes, this all exists, but who am I within it? And that shifted the way that I thought about it. And it wasn't just like, how do I make all this go away? It was that this shit's going to come up over and over again in your lifetime. Do you want to keep being thrown by it? Or do you want to be the person who can stand firm within it and find yourself again?
Yeah, and I also think that, well, I love that piece on like who do I want to become rather than like what's the outcome that I want out of these like very specific situations. But I also think, again, being cognitively and emotionally and mentally flexible is also allowing yourself in the moments that are really big struggles to also give yourself permission and in front of your children to be like, this is ripping me whole, like to be able to show that, like, you know, so a true optimist and someone that's really looking towards real optimism is someone that is not devoid of reality. They are very keenly aware of the setbacks and the roadblocks and the less than ideal situations. And they're really rooted in their authentic feeling, because a true optimist is a human, and humans experience the full range of human emotion. And they're not pushing things underneath the rug, but they realize the caveat is that whatever the struggle is temporary. And they truly believe inside that they have the ability to overcome or persevere it, even if they don't know how or when, but they just know that they will, based on personal historical resiliency. But also, someone that is looking in a more optimistic mindset is rooted in that authentic feeling. But at the very same time, even if it's tiny, whatever it is that they're feeling, that part might be the bigger one, but they like have this tiny little opening for hope, or for the possibility that this is going to change, or the entirety, they know it's going to change, but the possibility that the change might be better than what is current. That's all. That's all you have to be, is open to the idea that what you are going through right now is temporary, and that something will change. And maybe the change will be better. It will definitely be different than what it is currently. And that is really all you have to sort of go by. And I think it's just, whenever I share that, I think with people, I see in the room, like, just shoulders kind of go down a little bit, because there's some pressure relieved for people that are just like, oh, I didn't realize that I could still hold, and like very much hold, being, in grief or worry or anger or frustration, while at the same time, like, holding an optimistic mindset. Like, I thought I just had to be someone that, didn't sit in that. And that's just not possible. And it kind of brings back to the beginning of our conversation, when you're like, I don't really know if I have anything to learn from people that are just like positive all the time and feel like everything's going great all the time. Well, like, the reason you don't feel like you can learn from someone like that is because that's not truthful. No human feels 100% blissful and full of happiness and contentment and in the emotion of joy and elation 24/7. Nobody.
Right. And I know you're like, you don't know the religious side of things. I am kind of anti the religious side of things, but I grew up in it. So I've spent a good 20 years deconstructing. But there was a lot of just animosity towards it. Again, rejection of it all, like seeing the negative sides of it. And something about the last few years has been, again, holding space for it and being like, well, what is the truth within this beyond the manipulation that I see or the damage that it did to me? And some of the verses hit different when you're able to see it from a different level. And what I'm just reminded of, and what I'm reminded of by what you're saying is being of the world, but not in it. And it's the same thing with this moment. How can you be of it, but not in it? You're not rejecting it. You're not acting like it's not there. You're not turning an eye from it, but you also aren't identifying with it. You're not like, oh, this is me. This is going to be forever. It's that power of reframe. So thank you for.
And you can change your mind. And there's the mental flexibility as well, even if you don't right now, but just the idea of knowing. There's two things that I try to hold on to, and it's, I can change my mind, given the season that I might be in, given new information, given whatever the experience is. I'm not, I may really feel like I hold on to some certain truths, but I know that nothing is terribly permanent or rigid. And then the other thing is what I've learned from this past year and a half. I actually, ironically, in like a not good irony way, while I was writing this manuscript, was dealt some cards of life that put me in probably the hardest and darkest period of my life. And I was writing a book on optimism. And I think what I learned from all of this, and I tell myself over, is like, I can do hard things. And that's just something I come back to a lot. I talk a lot about affirmations, and I know it's kind of controversial, but I don't, and the science says, it's not just my belief, But I also agree with the science that blanket statement affirmations are A, oftentimes not beneficial, but B, at the worst, can actually be detrimental to the people that need it the most. I have this, something I talk about in the book and in my practice that I call the 7/10 rule. And you have to believe an affirmation 7 out of 10 to be true or a real possibility for me to tell you to be able to use it as an affirmation. And the same works for myself. And so you can't sit in a thought, this belief for decades of, I am undeserving of love and unlovable, and then have someone prescribe to you to stand in front of a mirror every night before going to bed and say, I am lovable. Like, that's not how your brain works. Your brain is a very, for lack of a cliche, smart organ. And, it is constantly collecting evidence. You are constantly collecting evidence to make what you believe even truer. And your brain doesn't work in the sense of just like flipping it around, like you're driving 100 miles on the freeway, on the highway, and then just like flipping, around a U-turn. And like, you gotta turn, you gotta put an indicator on, you gotta slow down, you have to, make that turn, find the new path, and then you can go fast down that. And so I think the thing that people miss a lot is that, you know, you have to truly believe something. And so I always think about that. And now an affirmation I can actually use is I can do hard things. And it's not something I believed in myself about before. And it's not a lesson that I wished upon myself to learn ever again or anyone else. But hey, I went through something really shitty, many things shitty, but this one in particular, which was the shittiest. And it's not over. It's not to say that my shitty cards will not come again. And even in this particular scenario, which had to do with one of my children and his health, which is in the prologue of the book. But I don't know what the future holds. But what I do know is that if and when things and shit hits the fan again, which it likely will in any capacity, I know that I can do hard things because I didn't think I could get through this. And again, it's not over, but I'm getting through it.
Yeah, we've had a doozy of a couple of years as well. And it's interesting how, even knowing how life works, I had to confront the fact that there was a part of me that thought, the more work that I do, the easier life will be. But then I realized, I think as somebody that's asking for rapid transformation, I'm actually going to be delivered a lot more blows than the person that's trying to just skate through life. And so what's helped me actually comes back to your idea of curiosity, but it's an identity base. It's like, who am I on the other side of this? I used to really sort of force myself into what's in this for me. And that always comes, but there's something more freeing about like, who am I on the other side of this? Because it recognizes that my logical mind might not always know or understand. I might not have this clear thing. This happened for this reason, but I will always feel stronger when I see the evidence of surviving, of finding joy after that, of connecting with myself when all I want to do is disconnect and run. And so thank you so much for all of the tools that you put in this book, for everything that's brought you here. I usually ask for a challenge or something to think about or something to do this week to really bring it into reality. And I know we've talked about a few actionable tools, but which one would you like to specify?
I feel like we talked a lot about like practical, but also very like deep shifts. There's something that I kind of feel like wanting to impart with your listeners that is like just very practical and something that you guys can do tonight immediately. A few things come up. I also have this card deck called Things Are Looking Up, and it's 52 different cards of literally that, just science-based prompts and actionable things you can do in less than like a minute, that actually train you to become more optimistic and resilient, from a science-based perspective. But one of the things I love, and I'm like sitting here in front of it is I always tell people, and it sounds really simple, and it is, and I love simple activities that actually are paired with something scientific that's really working in the brain to make real lasting shift, is I really encourage people to not make a to-do list in like the evening before they go to bed, but to keep something. And I just made these for myself, and I call it a to-do list. You can see that. Um, it says the power of real optimism, the to-do list, and in parentheses says this is not a to-do list. And it's literally a way to just jot down at the end of your day, like this is what I would want to be thinking of and want you to be thinking of as you wind down. Like, what are the things that you actually accomplished today? And the smaller they are, because you're going to be doing this on a daily basis, the better. It's like, I fed my children. I drank X amount of ounces of water. I woke up today. I got a shower in today. Or it could be something big. I landed this, big deal that I was working on, or I got in like a walk today, or whatever it is. You put down what you actually accomplished that day, and you go into your sleep and into the sort of last part of your day feeling a sense of self mastery and feeling a sense of inner confidence. And that is what I would prefer someone to end their day with, so that when they wake up the next morning, they feel self mastery and motivation and can conquer the things that they do need to do, and feel truly their mindset is starting to shift into a place where they feel like they are accomplishing so much, and really focusing on the small things that you do that we just overlook. Like, it shouldn't be overlooked that you are holding so much, that you are doing so much, that you are, doing all kinds of invisible work, but also very visible work. And this is especially true, every human, but especially true for women. Um, like, it's something that I think all of us need to be like highlighting for ourselves, in the same way that I always tell people to highlight what your strengths are. Like, what are you good at? We always, as humans, we tend to focus, it's just the way our brains work, on the things that we need to improve, the things that we need to get better at, the things that need fixing. It's also how our memory works. If you remember back to things in childhood, you are more likely to remember the things that sort of didn't go well, or things you made mistakes on, rather than the things that did go well. And we need to really retrain and focus intentionally on the things that are going well, or put a smile on our face, or our skills, or our strengths, and the things that we actually accomplished.
I love that. And it's something that I've come back to over and over again for over a decade. And a lot of times it's like a tool will work for a while and then I let it go. I feel like I don't need it. But that is one that I'm always like, why do I feel like nothing's going right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not actually consciously clocking it. So maybe I should start doing that.
And it's not a gratitude list, which
Yeah.
obviously there's so much science behind that. And I know that gives a lot of people the ick, because it's just become so overdone. And honestly, but it is such a strong practice to obviously practice gratitude. We have so much science behind it. I would say with that, though, the more specific you are, and putting your own self on your gratitude list is really powerful and something that people overlook. But we can become immune to some of these things. That's why, like, just taking it day by day and sort of giving yourself space at the end of your day to actually like contemplate and think about all the things that you've done and that you have accomplished, instead of letting your mind swirl with the things that you didn't do, is really powerful.
So, where can people connect with you and find your book if they're resonating with all this?
You can connect with me on socials. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Deepika Chopra. I'm not great with Instagram, like the strategy wise, but I'm really good at answering DMs. I love talking to people about this, obviously. My book is available everywhere. It's called The Power of Real Optimism. It is at every bookstore that you go and buy your books from, indie stores, big stores. I would love to talk about it. So if you are someone that is intrigued and you buy the book, please leave a review, talk about it with me. My goal and favorite thing looking forward about this book is just being out in the wild and seeing people read it. That's all. That's all. That's all I want, is to see the tools out there and to help people become more real optimists, because I truly believe that is what we need right now, is more real optimists.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.